With the midterm elections less than a month away, many people are preparing to vote. This Women's March to the Polls held in Chicago is encouraging people, specifically first-time voters, to cast their ballot. There were approximately 580 stations and 5,800 bikes located throughout the Chicago, Evanston, and Oak Park area previous to Divvy pulling out of Oak Park. The parade typically attracts thousands of visitors to the neighborhood, which is the largest Hispanic community in the Midwest. Here at Depaul, students have differing opinions about companies that scan social media posts to see if students could be a threat. The Trump administration has changed many of the norms we typically see at the White House, but recently in the Oval Office, this change went to a new level with a monologue from rapper Kanye West. It's called Lincoln Yards, and it's near Depaul's Lincoln Park campus. It's also one of the biggest redevelopment proposals in recent Chicago history. The popular app TikTok agreed to pay a nearly $6 million penalty from the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. On a brisk Saturday morning, thousands gathered on Columbus Drive, rallying for the Women's March to the Polls. With the midterm elections less than a month away, many people are preparing to vote. This Women's March to the Polls held in Chicago is encouraging people, specifically first-time voters, to cast their ballot. Before the march, speakers and performers filled the main stage at Grant Park, urging people to make a change by voting. One of those on stage was third-year DePaul student Amani Johnson. She's the co-founder of BRAVE, St. Sabina Church's youth-led anti-violence movement.
But our votes means just as much as anyone else's and more, because we have so much more on the line than any other group of people.
Colorful signs, flags, and balloons were raised by many as they listened to Melissa Dupre, the MC of the event.
This is what democracy looks like.
Claire Shingler, the executive director of the Women's March Chicago, shared what propelled this march.
So this march was about coming together to recognize we're not alone and then to vote, to exercise your civic responsibility.
The recent confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was accused of sexual assault, was an issue at the rally. After the rally, the marchers made their way to Federal Plaza, where those who were interested in voting could split off to early voting sites. Some first-time voters were smiling and taking pictures outside the early voting sites. DePaul alum Tina Byrne explained why she'll be voting in this midterm election.
I think voter registration is really important. Some people in my own family don't have the right to vote, so I think it's too much of a privilege to pass up.
And this is not the last Women's March we'll see. This coming January, the Women's March on Washington will take place once again. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Ariana Kraft. Alderman of the 14th Ward, Edward Burks, had a legendary run in Chicago politics. But things are shifting quickly, with Burke under investigation for attempted extortion. A company owning a chain of fast food restaurants in the Chicago area wanted to rebuild a Burger King in Burke's district on the southwest side. Burke is accused of asking that company to give business to his law firm in return for their permits. Chris Bury, professor and senior journalist in residence at DePaul, says Burke's power has been enormous.
Well, from a historical perspective, Alderman Burke is incredibly powerful. As chair of the Finance Committee, he controlled every bit of money that was spent in Chicago.
But his time as chairman of the Finance Committee has come to an end, with Burke resigning from his committee position after the charges against him were revealed. However, Burke, a DePaul grad, remains an alderman, and the investigation isn't stopping him from running for re-election. DePaul alum Jose Torres had been running against Burke in the aldermanic race. However, he recently dropped out of the race and is now chairing challenger Tanya Patino's campaign.
One of the biggest things that he's done is he saved Donald Trump over $14 million.
Torres was referring to the work Burke's law firm did in helping lower the property taxes on Trump Tower in Chicago. Alderman Burke's corruption case isn't the only obstacle presenting itself in his race for re-election. The 14th Ward, once predominantly white, has now demographically changed to a majority Latino population. Burke's case may also impact the mayoral race in Chicago. Some of the candidates have previous ties to Burke.
Tony Preckwinkle, the chairman of the Cook County Board, raked in over $100,000 from Burke in the last couple of years, including a fundraiser at his home. She's now returned that money.
Burke's preliminary court hearing, set for January 18th, has now been pushed back. Federal prosecutors requested a 3-month extension, meaning Burke's case will most likely not be in court until after the February 26th mayoral election. It's unclear how this case will play out, but for now it's created a new focus on Chicago's brand of politics. Reporting for Good Day Depaul, I'm Ariana Kraft. Like many Depaul students, Jonathan Annex is focused on his future, but his time at Depaul has been unlike any other student. April 10th, 2016 is a day he will never forget. It was the day Jonathan was caught in the crossfire of a random shooting outside of his home in Chicago's Little Village neighborhood on the southwest side. He was paralyzed from the waist down.
I was shot, and things kind of changed. I was basically restarting life.
Living in a technologically advanced society, Jonathan has received first-class treatment and benefited from new initiatives to help individuals with disabilities in getting around. But Jonathan prefers to keep it simple.
People always ask me why I prefer my manual wheelchair over like a power chair. It's way heavier, it's way bulkier, and I think it's fun getting around in these.
And for many students, college is a time to explore their own individual identity. Jonathan has done that by getting tattoos.
All of my tattoos have meaning, like some sort of meaning, even if it wasn't intentional to begin with. I'm able to find meaning within like symbols, you know? And aside from them providing meaning and telling a story, like my story, they're also just an art form.
Physical restrictions that come with being in a wheelchair have changed Jonathan's hobbies and activities.
I used to ride my bike a lot. I used to bike and run. Those are my two things, my like releases. So I couldn't bike anymore, obviously. I couldn't run anymore, obviously. As time went on, I started driving a little bit more. And it's also a way to connect because I went and got a 4-door. And now my friends can all ride with me and we can just, you know, be out and about.
Jonathan's resilient character stems from his positive mindset and outlook on life.
Things happen in life, and this was just one of those things that happened. You know, I had nothing to do with it. No one that I knew had anything to do with it. Like, it was just like a random occurrence. I try to keep myself positive.
New obstacles are constantly appearing in people's lives. Jonathan shared with me how he overcomes his barriers.
Luckily, I had my family, and they're the ones that helped me through it.
Jonathan Annex's time here at Depaul continues to show what hard work and a strong mindset can do, even in the hardest, most unpredictable times. For Good Day Depaul, I'm Ariana Kraft. The art scene in Chicago is filled with vibrant and diverse pieces of work, and you can find them almost anywhere you look. The Depaul Art Museum in Lincoln Park has a vision of its own, supporting the local Chicago art community. The Depaul Art Museum is open to the public and presents 4 to 9 temporary exhibitions per year. Right now, the museum is featuring a new exhibition called Butchcraft by artist Betsy Odom. Odom has immersed herself in the city's art scene for more than 10 years. She uses her artwork and sculptures as a way to tackle issues and start a conversation.
The difference is really what this work is about. It's about exploring sameness and difference. I connect that to sort of queer identity and this idea of how am I like everybody else, and why is it that I'm different from everybody else, and which side of that do I want to be on?
Inspired by antique malls and garage sales, Odom created an exhibition full of different sized sculptures with various textures, materials, and colors. The curator of this exhibition is the director and chief curator of the Depaul Art Museum, Julie Rodriguez Widholm.
I felt that there really weren't a lot of exhibitions of lesbian artists that I was seeing in the community, and I thought Betsy's work was really interesting in the way it plays with gender, sexuality, and sports.
And Odom's exhibit has a definite focus.
Each one is sort of kind of fascinated with its own craft, which is sort of where this idea of butch craft comes in, being proud of being of doing things that are more masculine, the idea of the masculine woman. And there's a lot of craft techniques and then a lot of references in here that play with that idea.
With venues such as the Depaul Art Museum, artists from diverse backgrounds are able to voice their thoughts on a wide variety of global topics.
The idea of the butch lesbian, I think, is extremely relevant right now because of this conversation about, about gender identity. I'm interested in that space where the butch dyke is not a man or a woman, but still situates herself within the feminine identity.
It's an exhibit that will provoke thought, that will lead to differing feelings among many people. For Good Day Depaul, I'm Ariana Kraft. Living in Chicago means layering up for the frigid winter temperatures. So imagine taking a quick dive into the cold abyss of Lake Michigan before spring even arrives. That's exactly what thousands of people in Chicago came together to do on March 3rd, and all for a good cause. Come on! Hosted at North Avenue Beach, this is the 19th annual Chicago Polar Plunge. This nonprofit organization is benefiting Special Olympics Chicago. The goal of the Polar Plunge is to race into the icy cold lake and then immediately jump out. And no matter how chilling it is, smiles and laughs are on the faces of many. All of the proceeds collected from the plungers will help support the Special Olympics Chicago, including transportation, medals, sports equipment, and trips for more than 7,500 area athletes who participate in the program.
Last year, I have a daughter with Down syndrome and love her very much, so I want to make sure we do it for everybody with special needs and Special Olympics.
Among the spectators was Depaul alum Jean Caraher.
I think it's really for a good cause. I think it is mainly about charity, but I also think people have goals that they want to achieve, and this is probably one of the things on their bucket list.
Plungers had the option of going in knee-high, waist-high, or, if they were brave enough, all in. And one thing's for sure, this year's Polar Plunge had people freezing for a reason. Reporting for Good Day Depaul, I'm Ariana Kraft.